Are Elden Ring swords realistic? Starting with the curved swords because I like curved swords. From Software starts off really strong with the Falchion because you can look at the Elmsley typology of medieval single-edged swords that includes falchions, and the sword in Elden Ring is pretty much a carbon copy of a 3B falchion. However, the next sword is kind of not the strongest. It's the Scimitar, and I really don't like the phrase scimitar, because at best it's just an incredibly vague lumping together of a large number of non-European curved swords. And at worst, that lumping together non-European things is a bit Eurocentric. But anyway, there's no single sword that's called a scimitar, and this scimitar here doesn't really look like a carbon copy of even any of the swords that are commonly referred to as scimitars. It has a few of the elements, but none really stand out. Next we have the Grossemesser, which is a term for medieval German swords. However, this sword doesn't really look like any of the real Grossemessers, and it looks more like an Ottoman killage. So far From Software is going 1 for 3. Next, the Mantis blade. This one's not absolutely horrible, even though it's a double-bladed sword. The blade on the bottom is shorter, and that has some historical precedent, but not too much. And even though it's pretty beefy, the wiki entry says that it's relatively thin, so it could work. It wouldn't be the best design in real life, in my opinion, but in the game, it works okay. The Scavenger's curved sword looks a lot like a really worn-down version of maybe something like an Afghan Khyber knife, but not an exact copy, and obviously it being rusted and chipped would be bad. However, the sword design itself isn't too bad. The Shotel is an actual African sword, and they were interestingly used to get around shields and do general sword things as well. Historically, they had double-edged blades, so you got a lot of versatility with this weapon. And I think that it's really neat that it's getting some more mainstream interest. The Eclipse Shotel is an incredibly ornate version of the last sword that I just talked about. It would obviously not be double-edged, however, given that the inside curve is still sharp, it can still do a lot of damage. For what's pretty obviously a ceremonial sword, it would be okay. And lastly, the Wing of Astel. It looks a lot like an improvised machete, so it would probably work as a sword, but not as good as an actual sword.